All right, day 13. Today we're going to be doing a lot of electrical work. So if you don't know a whole lot about electrical, just kind of bear with me because I'm going to do my best to explain what I'm doing and why I am doing it. So something I hope you guys have caught on by now about me is that I don't like to reuse things in campers that can be easily replaced. I don't reuse lights because it's just not worth my time to like paint them and do everything else that you need to do to make them look good. And a pack of lights is like 40 or 50 bucks. And so that's a win for me. So right here, I'm just going to go ahead and put in all these new lights. So this is kind of a close-up of one. These are LED lights. They are not bulbed lights like you'll find in most campers. Some of the new campers have LED lights, but I don't like the ones that have bulbs on them because they get really hot. And when I the first camper that I ever bought that had bulb lights, they actually had them in the bunk and it like burned one of my kids. And so from then on, I was like, nope, we're going with LED because the bulb ones get really hot. All right, so for RVs, you're going to have a 12-volt system, which is what the lights run off, or a 110-volt system, which is what your outlets run off, and a couple other things. So basically, you're going to get your 12-volt side, and you're going to connect it to the red wire on the light, and you're going to get your ground side, which is going to be the white wire, and you're going to connect it to the, I think it's a black wire on the lights. Now, the white wire on the camper, it's always going to be white. That's going to be your ground. And then your 12-volt, it might be a white wire with a black strip. It might be a white wire with a green strip or a white wire with a purple strip. That is going to be your 12-volt. But of course, if you don't know, you can always get your meter out and test the voltage from one side to the other and see which side is actually your ground and which is your power. This is actually the thermostat that I'm going to go ahead and wire. Up to this point, I have had no air conditioning and I've been working on this all summer. So this is the original thermostat that went in this, and you can see it's kind of labeled right there on what is what. And that's the original one right there that I saved. And it's always a good idea to take a picture of your original stuff if you're going to replace it. Now this thermostat, it's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. The only difference is this only has one fan speed versus the other one has two. And the instructions weren't really good, so I always took a picture of like the previous one that I had. But you see I'm kind of writing it down as I go so I don't get confused from the old thermostat versus the new thermostat. This isn't right, so don't go by that because I ended up changing this before I redid that piece of paper right there. But essentially, these are already pre-stripped from the other thermostat, so I'm just sticking the right wires in the right holes, basically. So what color goes where is going to depend on the original thermostat. But for this one, it's pretty straightforward. They've mostly been wired the same versus all the other ones. This one's actually not wired right either. And as you can see, I'll actually go back and fix this and you'll see why in just a second. But I'm just screwing it into the wall right there just to kind of snug it down so I can pop the face of the thermostat back on and try to see if it works. Now these thermostats, they do need a battery, so go ahead and pop the battery back in, and then there's a switch on the back that's gas and electric. If you have a furnace, you're going to need to switch that to gas. Otherwise, the fan for the AC will kick on every time you try to turn your heat on. All right, now something to explain about RVs. So the thermostat actually runs off of a common ground. And so you saw, I forgot because it's been a minute since I've done a thermostat. I forgot this when I originally wired it. And so your power is actually going to be your ground. So it's not going to be the red wire like you would naturally think it would be. Because I kind of tested it out. You can take your green wire and kind of put it up to the fan wire. And if your fan cuts on, well, then you know that's your power. So that's how I kind of troubleshooted and tested it out. And then once I switched the red and the green wire, it worked perfectly fine. So it's some pretty nice air conditioning there. And while you're watching this, because I'm doing 2 of these, and I'll explain what I'm doing in a second, there's going to be 2 fan speeds. You got to figure out which fan speed works. There's going to be a high fan speed and a low fan speed. You can use either one of those. I like to use the high if it will work correctly on high. So that's one of those things where I had to troubleshoot it. And you might have to switch your fan speeds depending on if it's going to work the right way with it on the high, because that thermostat has an auto mode. So there's no high and there's no low. Okay, so we are putting back in electrical outlets. Obviously, make sure your camper is not on while you're doing this because you don't want to electrocute yourself. I feel like that's hopefully a given by now. But this is pretty much, they just press on. I think there's actually a special tool to like press these in these little channels right here. But if you look on it, it'll tell you which side is white, which side is black, and then the middle is always going to be the ground. You basically just shove them in the little prongs that's in there, and then you clip the back on it, and it's self-contained, so you don't need a box, and it actually has screws. You screw it in, and there's like a little tab that pulls it close to the wall so it won't go anywhere. So these are really nice for RVs because you don't have to have a box for them. This is the one for the fireplace, and I haven't actually wired this to the breaker yet, so I'll do that next. But again, just stripping the wire right there. The black goes in the black side, and I kind of just shove it all the way down in the prong with a screwdriver. The white goes in the white side, and then the ground will always be in the middle. So these are pretty self-explanatory. This is the breaker panel right here, and this is not the right breaker that I'm doing this on. I actually ended up going back because I didn't like how overloaded this breaker was when I originally did it. There was not enough room for me to add another breaker for the fireplace. Originally I was going to wire it to the one with the converter, but I didn't like it. And so I ended up wiring it to the breaker with the air conditioner, because I figured you're not going to have the air conditioner and the fireplace running at the same time. So that was kind of a good alternative right there. My dad actually came up with that one. So props to him, because I was like, I really wish I had another breaker in here, but you're not going to be using them at the same time. So this is pretty self-explanatory. Take the breaker out, you strip your wires, the black goes in the breaker, and then the white goes in the bus bar where all of the white wires are, and then the ground, which is the copper wire, goes on the bus bar where all of the ground wires are. So nothing too crazy, too complicated. Just make sure that your power's off, because you don't want to be sticking your fingers in here while you have a bunch of live wires everywhere. So next I'm going to go ahead and join the wires that go to the slide. Again, these are 12 volt. And so I just strip these, and I do end up securing this to the wall and using some wire loom. But basically you twist them, and then I use crimp nuts. I don't use like regular wire nuts on this because I don't know, it's personal preference, to be honest with you. And full disclosure, I do use the crimp nuts on pretty much everything 12 volt. It's a little bit different with the 110 stuff because it's a different type of wire. All right, so moving on to the speakers, I had to put a new connector on this because it broke off. But pretty much for the speakers, you just have to remember which is the positive and which is the negative. And the only reason you know that is because you wired the actual radio that way. So I know that I wired the black on the radio to the positive, I think, if I remember correctly. And it's like a burgundy color was the negative. So that's literally, you just have to match the positive to the positive from the speaker to the radio, and the negative to the negative. Same thing with this one. I ended up putting new connectors on this one as well. These speakers are just marine grade speakers. You technically don't have to use those for the inside, but I ended up replacing the inside and the outside speakers, so I just made them all the same one because it was just easier to do that. The outside speakers were toast, so I'm definitely glad I replaced those. But again, just match the positive from the speaker to the positive on the radio when you wired it, and the negative to the negative. So nothing really crazy about that. You're going to hear me say positive and negative a lot. So I hope that you kind of catch on to what the positive and the negative is, and no basic circuits. All right, so y'all are going to laugh at me for this, but it really bothers me that old campers, like the plastics in them, turn like yellow. And this is something like super easy that I can just take off and paint. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And then this, I actually didn't replace this because these are pretty expensive to replace. These are like $40 or $50 for one of these things. And I don't like taping things up because it's just, I just don't like it. So I'm going to take this apart and paint the plastic and then put it all back together. So there's a little connector in there that is soldered on. And so I just used my pencil solder and I unsoldered it and then just pulled all the pieces out. And that was pretty much all there is to it. Then I can just paint this with some white spray paint and then it just looks nice and pretty. These are like one of the few things that I keep in campers. I don't keep switches. I don't keep lights. I don't keep speakers. I don't keep radios. I don't keep any of that stuff. It just really bothers me and it's not worth the time to like paint these things versus like spending an extra couple dollars to just totally replace them. Plus I replaced this switch. This is the slide switch with a pretty black one and I just like it a whole lot better. Basically I just unscrewed it and then took the connectors off and then popped the connectors back on the new one. It's literally as simple as that. And if it freaks you out to take wires off, then just take a picture of it before you take it apart. That way you know how you're supposed to put it back together. Okay, so next I'm going to start putting the kitchen back together because you notice it's missing a big part. But because I don't like to stick my head in small spaces, at least not more than I have to, I'm going to go ahead and put the trim around the wheel well right here. And then I'm going to go put basically the entire face of this cabinet with all the drawers back in. But I have to clean it off first. This has been sitting in like an outdoor shed that I have for a very long time, and so it's dirty and disgusting. So I kind of just blew it off, and then the countertops are actually stapled on, and so I just have an angle grinder, and I'm grinding off the staples that were still left in it. And then I am going to go ahead and do that to the other side right here. Some of these are like there's a panel that was attached to that side, and so it's like a head of a staple, so I don't have to grind it off. If it's the head of a staple, I'll go ahead and pull it out, but if it's like the other side where the prongs are sticking up, let's call it the butt end of the staple. If it's the butt end of the staple, I'm going to grind it off because I don't want to have to sit there and break the wood and try to pull it through the other side. Okay, so this is the side, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to blow it off, and then I'm going to get the angle grinder and grind all of that fun butt end of the staple off because there is lots on the top there. I really don't like it when they staple countertops in. It really just irritates me and makes my life difficult, but that's okay. We'll get through it. So this is me just cleaning all of this before I put it in because it's kind of gross and I'm going to end up priming it anyway. Again, I used a mixture of simple green and water and just clean it off the best I can. Nothing too special, too crazy about this. And once I put it in, it's pretty much going to be ready for primer. All right, so now that I've got it inside, I'm going to try to get this angle right because it's kind of at like a wonky angle. But in order to do that, I need to know how far it needs to go. So I'm going to pretty much put that side piece there as a placeholder so I know how far in or out the little angle right there is supposed to go. So if you see there's like a, I don't know, support piece right there in the middle that I had to staple back on, flipped it back around, and then I can staple this to the actual side of the cabinet right there. Now, I know you're thinking, oh my goodness, this is literally all the kitchen cabinet is a piece of 1/8 inch paneling and some plywood framing, like 3/4 inch plywood framing. Yes, it is. Sure is. Which is, you know, I guess it's light. I don't know. That's just how they make it. It's perfectly fine structurally, but I mean, it's probably not the way I would have designed it. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. So this is just me stapling in the other side of, I get kind of stapled into where the stove is going to be, and then I'm screwing in the framing part of this into the wall. That way it doesn't go anywhere. And then after that, I can start putting everything else back together. So for this plug, the antenna plug, I'm just going to go ahead and put it back together the way that I took it apart. So there's like a little gold piece that sticks through the back. That's actually the part that solders onto this little board right here. So I stick the board back in, and then there's a nut that goes on it to hold it in place. And then I can use my pencil solder to go ahead and solder that joint back together, which is, it's a lot simpler than it sounds. If you've ever soldered anything, you know that solder melts pretty quickly, especially when it's like a little itty bitty tiny thing. And then that's pretty much it. I can put that back in and move on with my life. Now, if you don't want to go back and look at the picture that you took, you can actually look on this board and see which one is the 12-volt positive and which one is the negative. And you can just go ahead and hook the positive and the negative wires up to that. You will need to know which of the coaxial cables goes where, because I think there's maybe like 2 or 3 of them on there. So this is just me going back at my camera and looking at that picture. And then I can go ahead and just put it back in the wall and screw those bad boys down, and that pretty much covers all of that. All right, so next I'm going to go ahead and put the fireplace in. And I was pretty excited when I got to this spot because that just means it's all starting to come together. And I love a good fireplace in a camper. So this is not an RV fireplace, and if you're worried about that, then buy yourself an RV fireplace. That's fine. The only difference really, other than some safety features that I don't really think are that pertinent, are this one is half of the price of the RV ones. I'll also just go ahead and tell you a trick. When you get these fireplaces, there's actually one silver screw on each side that's going to be a different color than the other ones. Those are the screws that you need to take out in order to lift this top off and get all of the instructions and all of that fun stuff out of the middle of the fireplace. Now, I actually don't like the original like decoration that was in there. I like these little like crystal things better that came with it. So that's why I took that out. And then I'm just going to slide this little thing back in. There's like little hooks and then it kind of sets in place. And so it's not going to go anywhere unless you specifically like lift the top off. So if you're worried about it coming off down the road, I wouldn't, because it's not ever going to be bouncy enough for that glass piece to pop out of the little channel that it's in. So I'm going to go ahead and plug it in and see if it fits. And I don't remember the reasoning. I think maybe it was like the framing was a little bit too thick for the side of the plug, and so I think I ended up just etching out like a little tiny piece on the right hand side right there with my multi-tool, and then it fit perfectly after that. And as you see, I did cover it with the plastic so I don't get like dust and all that stuff all on the inside of it, because you're going to be able to tell once you put that glass on if there's any like dust and grossness on the inside. So now that I know it's going to fit, I slide it in and it's perfect. And then there's just some screws. I think it's like 4 screws that go directly into the framing. Then you can pop that face back on. And here's a little like sneak peek of how it turned out, because y'all know this camper's done. And look how good it looks. I was so excited. Anyway, I will see y'all for day 14. Have a great night.